Hello. So, as we have heard, Cowboy Bebop on Netflix was an absolute failure, which I'm not surprised. I don't have Netflix because Netflix sucks. And again, you are feeding the demon if you continue to give Netflix money. But I'm not surprised that Cowboy Bebop failed. They didn't understand the characters. There's a reason why all of these reboots and recreations of classic IP end up falling apart. It's because people don't understand the characters. That's the first thing. The second thing is ego. It's sheer ego. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. We're going to talk about the reason why reboots and recreations fail. Cowboy Bebop is just one of the more modern examples. It's the same thing every single time. The the number one reason why reboots and recreations always fail is because they drift too far away from what the characters actually are. Every character is defined by I think K.M. Weiland called it the core wound, right? The reason why they do what they do. Too often, when you do reboots or recreations, they try to change that, or they'll factor it in, but they'll change it up in a way where they feel more comfortable with it. So you probably have some ideas of what I mean by a core wound. This is an expansion off of something I talked about, I believe, during either a Raw or Dynamite review. I talked about this. So the Batman. I'll give you some examples. Batman. What do you think motivates Batman? Why does Batman do what he does? Well, because Batman's parents were murdered right in front of him. Think about the things that Batman does. He is a man with an exceptionally skilled and rich man, but he's a man who puts on a bat suit to go out and fight thugs. In order for something like that to occur, to push you to that point, something had to have happened to you that makes you that way. In this instance, his parents were murdered right in front of him. Now, the best of DC Comics is when you don't know who killed Batman's parents, because then you can just say it was Gotham. Just the pure grit and grime and disgust of Gotham led to the murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne. But of course, then over time, they decided they're going to give the murderer of Batman's parents a name, which, is unfortunate. Because that guy can be killed, that guy can be imprisoned. If it's not a named guy, then of course it doesn't matter who it was. And Batman's mission, his journey, is then to stop murderers and rapists and robbers that victimize people like him. Spider-Man. Spider-Man lives under what we call the Uncle Ben curse. With great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man in his origin story, he has the power to stop a robber. He doesn't. He chooses to. I think this is very well told in the first movie, the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, where the guy screws him on his pay as a pro wrestler, and the guy's like, "Hey, stop that thief!" And he's like, "That's not my problem. That's your problem." And then the guy goes out there and kills Uncle Ben. So now Spider-Man is cursed with he could have done something, but he didn't. So Spider-Man, same thing. He's a guy who wears spandex and he goes out and climbs walls and shoots webs all across the city. Because he could have stopped the death of his Uncle Ben. He chose not to. He neglected his responsibility. So in some ways, it's his fault Uncle Ben died. And of course, that's not entirely true. But Spider-Man believes it, and this is what K.M. Weiland calls the lie that is within the wound of a character sometimes. Another one, Daredevil. Daredevil's father is murdered by the mob. Battling Jack Murdock he's a boxer. He's a sort of a Rocky Balboa in some instances. He's a bit of a middling mob guy, low level. He's told to throw a fight. He chooses not to throw the fight. Instead, he wins the fight, and then he's murdered by the mob for winning the fight. During his childhood, Daredevil is taught to play it straight. His dad says, "Don't be like me. You gotta be better than me. Focusing on your studies, focus on everything, even though he's already been blinded. His handicap is not, there's no excuses. Your handicap doesn't matter. Daredevil grows up to be a man that believes in justice. And sometimes justice has to be found outside of the law. This leads Daredevil to being a vigilante. Another good example is the Punisher. You look at the Punisher, what happens to the Punisher? His wife and children are gunned down at the park by warring mob factions. Now, because they're warring mob factions who were getting into a fight at this park, it doesn't matter who it was. I think it was the Irish and Italian mobs. Now, Frank Castle, in the movie, the I want to just call him Raiden. I don't remember his name, but he played Raiden in Mortal Kombat. That version of the movie, his entire family is gunned down at like a family reunion or something like that. But if I remember from the comics, Frank takes his children to the park where the mob is doing some type of drug deal. Things happen. Gunshots start going off. The family is gunned down. And Frank has a psychotic break. And he's not the wild and insane psychotic like you would think. He is a brooding, vicious, brutal man. And it turns him into the Punisher. And he goes to the extreme because he doesn't want other people to go through what he went through. So there's hundreds of these. Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. His entire family is murdered by demons with the exception of his little sister who has turned into a demon. And now the story is that he, of course, is going to not only slay demons because they murdered his family, but also try to find a way to fix his sister. Great story, great hook. In order for you to fully be able to translate those stories into any other medium, whether it be comics or television or movies or animated cartoons, you have to understand those character dynamics. You have to understand why Batman doesn't kill. You have to understand Captain America. You have to understand Superman. Captain America and Superman don't have wounds, though. Captain America is a good man. He has not made one. He is one. It comes from his general nature. Superman, same thing. Part of it is their upbringing. The people that raised them imbued them with higher values, and they're the moral standards for their universes. Sometimes they make mistakes, but overall they don't need to learn anything. They are the teacher. They teach others how to be better. You have to fundamentally understand Captain America when you write Captain America for a movie or a television show or anything. You have to fundamentally understand Captain America. If you don't understand it, it will never work. So Cowboy Bebop fundamentally didn't understand the characters. And I can tell they didn't understand the characters by watching literally 1 minute of the show. I saw Radical Edward. When Edward, oh, it was so bad because they focused again on the wrong parts. Edward, the core wound of Edward is that she is an orphan. She was abandoned by her father. But Edward floats through life without that even really bothering her. The very essence of Edward is that she's innocent. Not that she's zany and over the top. It's that she's pure. She's innocent. She's the one member of the Bebop crew that is, despite the fact she also has a sad backstory, she's almost completely untainted by the rest of the world. Ed is a teenage girl who loves life, has a zeal for life, but she's very naive. She's very smart, but she's also very naive. She doesn't really understand a lot of different things. She grew up in an orphanage, and, that's the core of the character. Not, the rolling around on the ground or the walking around barefoot or her weird way of speaking. All that stuff is just mannerisms. The true core of Edward is in her innocence. And this show did not capture that at all. And she was only in the show for, a couple of minutes. But you can tell that they didn't understand it. It was disgusting. And I decided I wasn't going to watch the show anyway. But I really wasn't going to watch the show once I saw that. Once you look at what Netflix did to Death Note, the Death Note movie, how horrific, how little did you read not only the source material, but how little did you not understand the source material. For you to come up with the version of Death Note that they came up with for that fucking Netflix movie, you literally made that shit up whole cloth. The only thing you took from the original source material was the Death Note. Literally everything else, you threw it in the garbage. The entire detective cat and mouse game of Light and L, you threw it away. You threw it all in the trash and just decided to wrap it in a teen drama. It was awful. And it was awful because they didn't understand the franchise. They didn't understand the characters. What people are looking forward to is to see you attempt to recreate the characters that they already care about. And you failed. And you continue to fail. And the reason why they continue to fail is 100% ego. It is ego. And it all begins when you see people talk about, hey, we're going to reimagine this franchise for a new generation. And the first thing they do is change what a character looks like. It's the first sign. That is the original red flag. Whenever you hear about a reboot or a recreation, and the first thing you see is a race change, a gender change, or a costuming change, you should know something is going wrong. The moment I started seeing that, not that Jet was black in Cowboy Bebop, I didn't really trip on that. But Faye Valentine, when they changed how she looked, I was like, they're changing the character. Because part of what Faye Valentine is she's the femme fatale. She's not the best fighter on the team. She's slick, though. She's the one who gets you to drop your guard. She's a manipulator. She's the Black Widow of the team. Part of that is represented in how she dresses. When they made Faye Valentine put on all those clothes, I knew they were going to change the character. And so then I started seeing people talk about, oh, how Faye is basically just female version of Spike in the TV show. And I say, well, they didn't understand it. They didn't. It's not. But at the same time, saying that they didn't understand it, maybe it's giving them too much credit. And this is what I mean by ego. It's that they understood. They just didn't like it. Because modern day politics and modern day writing is writer centered. It's ego centered now. The writer brings their own politics, their own ego, their own likes and dislikes to these franchises, and then decide that they're going to change things based off of what they want, not what the audience wants, not what the people who already like the franchise wants. Their needs and desires and wants trumps whatever the fans wanted and whatever the characters are or what the original creator created the characters to be. Their ego is so fragile that they have to have 100% monopoly control over these franchises. So, and they begin doing it by changing what the characters look like. It's the first thing they do, is they start talking about how something is problematic. If you thought it was problematic, why do you even want to work on it? That's the question. If I thought something was problematic, I wouldn't even want to be bothered with it. But they care more about the paycheck, and they care more about doing what they want to do, that they put their desires and their needs first. Kevin Smith running around talking about this is a He-Man TV show, and he supposedly killed He-Man in the first 2 episodes or something like that. And then it's Teela, who has been changed to be more muscular, more masculine. All of that has already taken place. It's not He-Man at that point. You've already changed the entire dynamic of the show because you got rid of He-Man and Skeletor. You had him, I think she killed them off in the first 2. I'm speaking a little bit out of school because I didn't see that either. Again, I don't watch these shows. I hear a lot about them though. So, and I can tell you, that's not what for starters, He-Man dying is already wrong. You're already wrong. You can't kill He-Man. He's the fucking star of the show. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a Mega Man with no Mega Man. We're going to have a Mario Brothers with no Mario Brothers. How are you really going to have a He-Man show with no He-Man? That's already a disaster. It's already a disaster. Next thing that you may see is that they'll do gender and race swaps. But it's over and over again. You'll end up with the same thing. So whether it's Star Wars, Avatar, The Last Airbender, Dragon Ball, Terminator, Ghostbusters, He-Man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, It's all the same thing. The first thing they will do is change what the characters look like. Now, you may say, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, what are you talking about? Well, they did a cartoon called Rise of the TMNT. This show butchered the entire concept of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles by, for starters, changing the characters and what the characters stand for. Specifically, they turned Splinter into a lazy fat oaf. And I just looked at this and said, you don't understand it, or you were so arrogant that you thought you can just change this franchise because you wanted to. The Turtles are literally polar opposites of one another. Okay? Leonardo and Raphael, both are polar opposites of one another. Donatello and Michelangelo are polar opposites of one another. And the team works because each one of them has an individualized role. You can't just take Raphael and say, we're going to throw a blue bandana on him and that's the new Leonardo. That's not how that works. That's not how that works. They don't all have the same personality either. They don't have all the same likes and dislikes. You can't just, it's not interchangeable where you can just take things and change it up and then people are going to like it. No, there's a reason it failed. It failed because nobody recognized this franchise that you have just butchered and called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I know what that is. 30 years of it, I know what it is. You decided to take it and do what you wanted to do with it, and then people rejected it, and then you called them man babies and you called them names. Same thing with Thundercats. Thundercats is a 30-year-old franchise. We know what Thundercats is. You decided to take that. We're going to do a reboot. And then they always lie and say, oh, we were fans of the originals. But we want to update it for the new kids. And then all of the cool stuff is taken out and replaced with, boogers and usually sex and drugs and all kind of other stuff. We'll get into that into a second too. Because they'll just take something and put foul language in it, or sex or something like that, which is another way of them bastardizing the franchises that they claimed that they loved and cared about. When you don't understand the characters, which happens. Sometimes a comic book writer will get on the book, he doesn't really understand the characters. He writes the characters off. He's off model. An artist has to be on model. A writer also has to be on model. A writer who doesn't really understand the characters, maybe it's not their genre, maybe it's not their thing, but they're going to try it. They write characters and they write them off model. It's a mistake, it happens, you can usually retcon that, and we can do it over. But in modern world, they say, whatever we did was the right thing, we were right, you were wrong, and you should have bought this because it's better than what you think. When they made X-23, Laura, when they made her Logan, they made her Wolverine. For starters, what you're saying is this girl can only be validated by being Wolverine. Secondly, you're just saying just anybody can be Wolverine. It's like, no, what makes Wolverine isn't the costume, it's not the claws. What makes Wolverine is that he was tortured for years and years and years. Because his power was to regenerate. And he was tortured. His bones was cased in adamantium, which made the claws spring out in metallic ways. Years upon years of torture and psychological damage turned Wolverine into a feral man-beast. And being a part of the X-Men is a way of domesticating Wolverine. It's a way of giving him a family that he never had before that smartened him up. That's what Wolverine is. Wolverine is not a costume. He is not just a name. You can't just take Wolverine and slap it on somebody and say they're Wolverine. That doesn't work. It never works. It will never work. Okay? That's why it fails. That's why this stuff fails. You can't just take a little black girl and say she's Iron Man because, it's modern day. No. You can't do that. What makes Iron Man is his relationship to the government and being a contractor and what he thinks about weapons of war and his relationship to his father and, following in his father's footsteps, but also wanting to be his own man, all that kind of stuff. The validation that he wishes he could have gotten from his father, but his father's already dead. All that kind of stuff. His battles with alcoholism. That makes Iron Man who Iron Man is. Okay? Not he's Iron Man because he makes metal suits. That's just what he does. That is not who he is. When you don't understand, when you think you know better, the reboot can do nothing but fail. Now, I did I hilariously I was watching a video and I saw that they're making a reboot, or they're doing something, some type of update of Fresh Prince of Bel Air, and it's called Bel Air, and and I looked at it, just the trailer, and I said, this is going to be horseshit. Now, why did I think it was horseshit? And Will Smith is going to be involved with this, by the way, but we don't know. He's just lending his name to it. I doubt he cares. He just wants the money, because that's just kind of how these people are. It's the same thing with Ghostbusters, Star Wars, whatever. These people, the people that you know and love that are attached to these franchises, they'll put their name on it. Just like Kevin Eastman will put his name on a comic book that says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that features fucking Jenica, who is the 5th female turtle. And you're kind of like, wait, why would he put his name on here? It's like, well, he's trying to get you to buy the fucking book. That's why. His input in this is minimal. Likely, the input of Will Smith on whatever reboot of Fresh Prince of Bel Air exists is going to be minimal. He's not going to have full control over it. It's controlled and operated and run by NBC. It's going to be whatever they want it to be. But this is what I said is going to be some bullshit. I saw that it's going to be TVMA. And I said, Fresh Prince of Bel Air is going to be TVMA. That means sex and violence is going to be in this show. Neither one of which you need to tell any of the stories that Fresh Prince of Bel Air was telling. Fresh Prince of Bel Air was a very deep show. I didn't really understand it as a kid, but of course, as you grow up, you understand it a little bit more. It was a very deep show. You know, Will was a kid who, comes from a difficult background. His mom essentially shipped him to Bel Air, and they said in the opening scene, in order to save his life. Now, it's put in a humorous way, but you see it as a story of Will taking his coolness out to Bel Air, where everybody's all stuffy and upbeat and all that kind of stuff. But he's a homeboy at heart. And it's a fish out of water story, as Will is living now with these rich people, and he's trying to be hip, and they're sticking the mud to a degree, and he's having some impact on them, and then there's some cultural back and forth with him and Carlton. It makes it for a really great show. You don't need sex or violence to tell the story of the Fresh Prince of Bel Air. You don't need that story at all. You don't need it at all. This tells me that the people who were involved in the story thinks that there should be sex and violence in it. That's what they think. Now, why would I think that? Because Marvel's Eternals. There was a big deal about which it was also another flop, right? People didn't understand the characters. The Marvel's Eternals flopped. And then what I saw a lot of is it had Marvel's first gay kiss in it. But that wasn't really even the issue. It said it was the first Marvel movie with a sex scene. And then people said, well, you would think that people who lived for a really long time, they would have had sex, right? Like, it seems very childish that they would never have sex. And it's like, it's an obsession with sex and violence and superficial things. It's hookup. We got to put hookup culture in your Marvel movies now. There's no reason for it. There's no need for it. The Eternals is not about that. The Eternals is not about hookup culture. It's not about characters hooking up because they've been together for a long time. You were completely in the wrong. You can have sex in a comic book movie. I don't see why you would want to, because if you're marketing that towards children, but you can. But it still makes no sense for you to do that. But it's all about the writers. It's what the writers and the directors wanted to put in there. They weren't thinking about the fans. They weren't thinking about the consumers. They weren't even thinking about the people. Jack Kirby, who created the Eternals, the original creator of the Eternals, they weren't even thinking about them. They were thinking about what they wanted. It was all about them. They wanted gay characters in the story, so they put gay characters in the story. They wanted to put sex in the story, so they put sex in the story. Nothing anybody else wanted mattered. It was all about them. It was all about their ego. This is why reboots always fail. You don't understand the characters. You have a fundamental either dislike for the characters and the property, or you're just plain naive and you don't really understand it. But the worst offenders are the arrogant ones, the people who think they know everything, or they lie and say, well, of course, I was a huge fan of He-Man or She-Ra or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Thundercats or whatever the hell. I was a huge fan. Then why does your characters look this way? Why aren't your characters like, if I was to write a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story, it would be fucking cool because I'm a fan of the franchise. I would at least get the voices and the mannerisms of the characters involved correctly. I would at least get, even if it was a boring story, at least I would have all the pieces in the right place. If I didn't know how to play chess, that's perfectly fine. I could suck at chess. But at least I need to know how the pieces move. At least I need to know where the pieces are on the board. These writers get so arrogant that they think that they can play checkers with chess pieces. And you're supposed to just say, it's cool, because we're all creative, bro. Fuck you. Of course Cowboy Bebop failed. Of course Hawkeye is failing. It's not just because Get Woke Go Broke. It's because you don't understand the shit that you're trying to recreate. So stop recreating and stop supporting recreations. I'm done with it, personally. I really get to the point, man, where I don't even care about this kind of stuff anymore. But I feel like I need to talk about it every now and again. So, thank you guys for listening. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.